Coach, thanks for joining us. If you don't mind introducing yourself to the audience, just in case they don't know who you are.
Absolutely. My name is T. Overman. I'm currently the defensive coordinator at the University of Dayton. I've been here for just over a year now. I've had previous stops at Division II school down in North Carolina, where I'm from, Wingate University. I was there for 9 years. I actually coached at University of Dayton in 2016, and then I went to Washington State. I was on staff there for 2 years, and then I returned back to Dayton last March.
Thank you, Coach. Your first question for you. You guys have a really good, strong safety. Do you scheme around him or try to scheme in a way to get him more involved, especially against like an impact player?
No, I don't think so. I think we kind of let it organically happen within our scheme. I would say the one piece that we will change for him, and speaking in last year, was if we were in a man situation, we would rather have him play man coverage than the other safety, and they both felt comfortable in that. So we kind of played to the strengths of him and the strength of the other safety. Hey, the other safety, if we're in a man concept, man free, anything where we're going to have somebody high and play man underneath, why don't you're going to be the middle of field guy, and then let that other safety be our man guy, because he was more comfortable there and he took a lot of pride in that. So other than that, I think the scheme we play, things just kind of play out, and we don't try to overcomplicate things and put him in situations where he's running all over the field and trying to figure out 15 different things, and we just kind of let it happen organically, and know your assignment, know your rules, and if it comes your way, great. If it doesn't, do your job and be the best at it. So
Question two for you, Coach. When game planning, what is the top three things that you look at or consider when putting together a game plan?
I think number one is and maybe not in any particular order. This is just me thinking out loud. Keeping things as close to our base as possible in terms of simplicity. I don't want to try to reinvent the wheel each week. Anything that we can carry over, I think, is always good. Whether it's a name of something we ran in the previous week, or a technique by a guy on a certain stun or blitz or what have you. I think those things always help to kind of build on that, not necessarily keep it the exact same, but anything that you've already used that you can continue to build on. Another one would be, what are they? Where do we need to make our changes? Like what do we need to make sure that we're doing in order for us to be sound, irregardless of the formation. So, you're kind of getting to the nuts and bolts of things. Are they a personnel based team? Are they a formation based team? Or maybe both? So we have to look at, okay, because for me, calling the game every week, sometimes it could be different, right? I could be calling it a personnel based game, or some weeks the personnel is irrelevant or they're the same once, and now I'm calling a formation based game. So, which one of those are we going to need that week, and then try to structure the package based off of those things, so that as we're going over the adjustments and the tweaks, that we're talking to the players in regards to, like, hey, this is when you're going to see this, or this is the grouping that they're going to be in when we'll run this. So I think those things are pretty important. And I think the third one would be, what can you do to kind of keep them off balance based on what you've done the previous week or maybe the previous couple weeks. And that could be as simple as, something they do that actually helps you get off of the, hey, we always blitz from the field, the last 2 weeks. Like, now we want to blitz from the back. Maybe it's because of something they're running that it makes more sense to come from the back. Or, hey, they're gonna put this guy over on this side of the formation. So any formation checks, we want to have them to that side. Just the nuances within the game. And I know it's kind of like a broad, soft answer, and it's not intended to be. I think there's just each week, sometimes it seems like it's so different. It could be a multitude of things. Some weeks, honestly, I sit down and I almost feel dumb, because I think some of the things we had put in the previous week and our base defense should stop their base offense. So I think sometimes you can go chasing ghosts if you try to do too much or you try to outthink yourself, and just start with your base. And then what do you want to carry out of your base? And then just make your adjustments off of that. Because reality is you're not, at least me, I can't see myself calling, 50 different defenses. You're going to have your, excuse me, your base stuff and, a couple 5-man pressures, some 6-man pressures, your some sort of man coverage stuff, some cover 3, some quarters, whatever. And then, your line son games. But reality is you can't run everything in your playbook each week. You're going to run out of opportunities, and maybe the situation doesn't dictate itself. So, it's constantly evolving. And I think to some degree, for me, it's easiest to start with, hey, this is what we ran last week. We have that when it's time to start, grinding the gears and getting there, and then take stuff off. And as you take stuff off, then you can replace it with new things. But you don't want to leave it all and then add a ton more things on there. That's just my opinion.
Okay. No, good, Coach. Is there anything in particular that you have your coaches in the box looking for during the game to gain an advantage?
Yeah, so I don't know if this is an advantage as much as it is helping me. So we have a small staff, I'm sure, of like a lot of smaller colleges and even high schools. We have 2 guys on defense in the box. I have a guy that works in the secondary with me, and he's up there. And our defensive ends coach, he's also up there. So those 2 guys are up there. And what they do, I have this sheet I give them for the box, and we essentially just split the sheet in half. So the defensive line guy, he's up there. He's calling out personnel. All right, so that's what he's doing first and foremost, calling out personnel and which hash it's on, which most of the time I can see, but it's always helpful if it's in the middle or, sometimes that gets a little blurry from the sideline. But so he's personnel, hash, and then he is writing down what run play they ran. So he's watching, okay, what'd they run? Okay, they ran, power to the tight end side. So he's gonna write that down. The secondary guy is gonna try to get the formation and then any pass concept. So if it's a pass play. The big thing for me in the run game, and it's funny, I have to sometimes apologize after the game to those guys because I get a little animated, but in the run game especially, sometimes it's so hard from the sideline to see where the ball exactly, like where exactly did it go. So I think that's where having that guy focus on the box and specifically the defensive line and what the run was. Like if they're running power and that's a play they ran when we were breaking down film, we should know how their tendency where they want to run it. And unless they change something drastically, we should know how we should be fitting it. So if he can see the play side of the power and kind of use deductive reasoning, if it squeaks through, like, okay, it was either the D tackle or let's say the defensive end and the front side linebacker. It was one of those 2 guys that didn't fit it correctly. That's huge, because what I like to do when they come off the field in between series is to literally draw up anything that may have given us issues, or I just want to make sure that they're comfortable with, something they're going to continue to run. Is when they come off, I'm trying to draw that stuff up. So him seeing what the run play actually was and having an idea of where the ball went, that will help us know like who messed up, and then we can address down the sideline. Now in the passing game, it's the same thing for the second guy up there, and he does a great job in terms of just relaying the routes quickly. And I'll tell you the other thing that started doing last year was we had a guy that was slated to be our starting corner. He got injured during camp, and he had to have knee surgery. And once he got off his crutches, any game that he was at, we actually had him. I made him a sheet and laminated it, but it had essentially had 8 boxes, 4 on each side. It was laminated, and then he could draw up the pass concepts too from the sideline. So let's say the guy in the box only saw the far side. Well, then this player, he would try to watch our sideline side, so that again, at the end of the drive, we can say, hey guys, when they're in 3-by-1, they're running this, and this, and so they can see the routes again. Because maybe I was a backside safety and I didn't see the front side routes, but at some point that's going to flip. So you kind of got to get creative a little bit, but just the second piece of all that, and I know I'm kind of rambling, is at halftime, getting those sheets from those guys and just kind of looking at them again, right? Like settling myself down and taking a look and seeing like, okay, they're running the crap out of power. Like maybe you see they're running power, but now they have it on there and it is exactly what you think, and just kind of looking at it from a strictly analyzing it as opposed to watching it. Because I mean, being on the sideline and calling, I think emotionally you get caught up in the game quite a bit. So sometimes I have to have a time to reflect and try to visualize and create what tweaks do I need to make before we go in there with the guys and that kind of stuff. So I mean, those guys in the box are vital, and you can ask anybody that's ever been up there. It's not easy. I was up there for several years, and you really got to train yourself to watch specific things, because if you try to watch everything, you see nothing. So, hats off to anybody that's in the box trying to relay information.
Thank you, Coach. Kind of next question kind of goes into install. What is your install schedule like? How many blitzes, formation, fronts, coverages do you try to put in a day? And then how quickly do you want your base stuff in, or your stuff that you're probably gonna go week to week using that aren't necessarily adjustments?
Um, well, I can give you. I'm gonna actually open up my. I'm not gonna share my screen, but I'm gonna open up my spring install that we were gonna do had we had spring practice, and
Okay.
we actually did use this for our virtual. We did essentially a virtual install, and we used kind of the same schedule to go ahead and do that, so we didn't feel like we missed anything. But so I'm looking at it here. So typically, and I think it's we spread it out a little more in the spring, and because we have a little bit more time, and we're not preparing for a game necessarily. We're just trying to get good at our base stuff, and we leave a couple things out, but for the most part, it's pretty true to form. So I'm looking at it here. On day one, we were going to put in, one front, 4 stunts, and our quarters coverage, which, within quarters, there's quite a few, nuances and adjustments to trips and things that you can do. The second day, we're going to put in some of our back base fronts, and so that's really 2 of those. And then we had, again, 4 line stunts and some coverage variations, and then obviously start working on some, like on here I had a notation to work on a bunch stuff out of 3x1. And then from there on, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, it's really like a front or 2 a day. And then once we get through all of our line stunts, then we start phasing in our pass stunts, because I feel like D linemen can get bored with the install if they don't really have anything. Although they should never get bored with doing technique right, because that's really a lot of that is just being physical and being a technician. But to keep them mentally engaged, I try to, if they don't have anything super important necessarily going in for the run game, try to put those guys at least a passing line stunt or 2 in a day. And then once we get that stuff in, our quarters, our cover 3 stuff, then you start talking to, all right, now let's get into some 5-man pressures, and then that leads into 6-man pressures, and then and I shouldn't say 6, fire zone pressures, and then that leads into our man pressure. So we try to get our base defense installed within the first 3 to 4 days, and then we essentially take the next 3 to 4 for pressure package. And then after that, it's anything else auxiliary. Like we got a bare front we'll use if we want to do any 3 down front. Any of anything else that we think we may use at some point during the season, that's when that stuff will go in. So it's kind of like it's not a 3-day install. Like if you talk to somebody in the air raid, like one of my best friends, he's in the air raid, they're on a 3-day cycle, right? That's what they do. 3-day review, 3-day review, so on and so forth. But we're kind of a 3-day block of, okay, base, pressure, extra, and then maybe based on our practice schedule, because I actually do look at that for our install, because if we don't have a ton of meeting time, maybe that night or that morning or whatever, if it's going to be crammed, then I don't want to put something in that takes a little bit of time to install. So you kind of got to keep that in mind as well, based on what your practice structure is. And I'm not the head coach, so I don't set those times. So I have to kind of abide by those guidelines, and try to be smart with it. And sometimes you can't avoid it, based on the condensed camp at times. I know when I played, it seemed like a lot longer than it is now, but I think those are some factors that you got to keep in mind is, meeting times, practice time, walkthrough time, however it's set up. And I know everybody's different. And, high school, I couldn't even begin to try to act like I know how high school coaches do it these days. I have no idea. So I think it really just depends on the structure from the head coach. And then, what do you believe in? Do you want to spread it out a little bit and try to be good at it, or do you want to throw a lot at them and then just kind of continuously teach on the fly? And I think we're probably in the nice point there where it's a little bit of both to a degree. And quite honestly, I think after the beginning, when you get your nuts and bolts in, when you start getting into your pressures and stuff, that's when you can start adding things faster. Because really, if you're talking, all right, you got to go to bed with something. What are you? Offensively, defensively, like what's your base? Well, then you should be really good at your base because everything else is just going to build off your base. So once you get that foundation laid, then I think it's kind of go time.
Okay. You mentioned quarters during that, and I know you guys are a big quarters team. What do you think, both at the high school and college levels, probably either missed or under taught in terms of teaching kids quarters?
Well, I think high school, like some of the guys that I know and buddies of mine that teach high school or and coach high school football, I think some of it is they get nervous at who their Jimmies and Joes are, right? Like, can this guy play quarters? And I say quarters like trap quarters, right? Or your two read, your palms, all that stuff. Like they get like one of my best friends, he's a head high school coach down in North Carolina, and he and I have had numerous discussions, and some of us like I don't want to leave that corner. I don't know if he can do it, or my safety, he's not the fastest guy. So if they try to isolate him with a deep out by number two, like it's going to be different things like that. I think is where, at least from people I've talked to in high school, that seems to be where they're reluctant to run the quarter scheme, and so therefore then they go to cover three, right? Keep it somebody in the middle of the field, and I think that's the other piece is get people that are reluctant is they get nervous that there really is no middle of field player in quarters. However, I think you can manufacture that sometimes in 3x1 and sometimes 2x2 based on the route concepts and how you're teaching it. Now, what's missed, or how do you phrase that question?
Like what is either under taught or missed in terms of teaching quarters to high school or college?
And I don't really, to be honest, like this is going to sound, I don't know. I really don't know what's missed, because I feel like at the end of the day, quarters is essentially, there's a lot of rules per se, but if you follow those rules, you got a fighting shot, So I don't know what necessarily is getting missed. I just think it makes people nervous because it ends up turning into man coverage. I think that's probably having nobody strictly in the middle of the field, the people you have, and then essentially it's turning into man. I think that scares people, where there's also a lot of added bonuses. So, I mean, it just depends on what school of thought you're brought up in. And, the only thing that I can think that keeps going through my head when you say under taught, I think this is going completely off the rails here, but is corners backpedaling. I think that's something that's missed, but that's a whole nother subject. So.
Okay. No, thank you, Coach. Kind of next question is, what does a typical in-season practice schedule look like for you guys in terms of how much any time you get? Like, what kind of like pod or group situations do you do? Like, what is that? How much team time, etc.
So we never get more than 15 minutes of individual time. So which some people might think that's a lot. I've been places where we got half hour every day. Like we were just adamant on keeping our individual time. It was like gold. But so you gotta get a little creative. But we get 15 minutes of individual time, and in that, what we do a lot of days is we'll go down with the offense for like the last couple minutes and do some wide receiver DB one-on-ones just to get that speed going. And some, one day we'll do open field, the next day we'll do the red zone, but that's real quick hit them, and we kind of got to steal that from our individual time. And then we have we do our inside run and our scale period at the same time. So I'll be over at the scale period. So I'll have the scout offense over there, and I got somebody run the cards, and then we'll have one set of our corners never leave scale, so they're always there, and they're rotating every 4 or 5 plays, whatever we tell them. The linebackers and the safeties and our nickel, half of them come over to scale, the other half go to inside run, and then halfway through that period, I think that period is usually during the season, probably around 20, maybe 25 minutes, there's a horn that goes off, and then they flip. So then we just go back to the top of the script, and then they, over an inside run, they go back to the top of the script. So those guys, the second level guys and third level guys, get both of those periods each day on Tuesday and Wednesday are heavy work days. And then we go to team, and team is usually 30 minutes, and we rotate every 6 plays. So we script it right hash, middle, left hash, and then we go back to the right hash again and kind of go through. But what we do when the ones, once they get, let's say they get all 18 plays, so they go 6, they're out, 6, they're out, 6, they're out. When they come back up, we'll go back to another set. We're typically going to script, I think, 24 plays during team period. So they'll kind of go back and forth, but they never hit the same one twice. But the only other thing that we do is at the beginning of practice on Tuesdays, we have a 5 to 10 minute window there where we will do essentially a defensive walkthrough on cans. So we'll have the cans out there as the O-line, and then we've got all the skill players on offense. So if they're 11 personnel team, I have 11 personnel over there, and I'll give them new calls that we're putting in that week. It may be a base call that has adjustments based on motions, or maybe we're setting the front differently than we have the previous week, or what have you. And we'll go through those new things as a group. So the ones are out there, the twos are the skill guys, everybody else is watching, and we're just kind of trying to go through those calls, get as many as we can. And then once I feel like the ones, they got it down pretty well, we'll flip, get the twos in for a couple, and then we'll kind of start practice from there. So we try to steal a little time, especially on Tuesdays, because unlike some of the Power 5 schools where they're done in class at whatever, 1:30, 2 o'clock meetings start, from meetings to go right out to practice, we may have a position meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then we don't see them again until 3:30. So there's a giant gap there where I feel like it's beneficial for us to kind of hit those things again, and you're hitting it a different way. The first time was in the meeting room. You're drawing on the board, you're giving them a handout, you're watching film. Well, now they've got to actually line up and do it before they have to do it full speed in the team period. So, and that's generally Tuesdays and Wednesdays throughout the entire season. That's kind of how the practice is set up. And, obviously we got our special teams periods trickled in there, but, from an offense-defense perspective, that's kind of the guts of the practice.
Okay. In terms of that, a little bit deeper into that practice, what drills do you consider everyday necessity, either for your position group or for your defense, that you rely on to get your guys better every day?
I think one is tackling. Like, we're going to implement tackling every day. Most of the time, I shouldn't say most, I would say 95% of the time on Tuesdays during the season, we'll do a tackle turnover circuit. And it's usually 4 stations. And of those 4, at least 3 of them are tackling, and then 1 of them is more geared towards turnover. So we're going to do that every Tuesday. And then Wednesday, we're going to make sure that each coach is doing something of tackling. So maybe you're doing a block obstruction drill as a linebacker coach, where you're going to get off a block and now go make a tackle. So everybody's going to implement that. So that's important, because if you can't tackle, you're not going to win very many games, right? If you can't block and catch on offense, you're not going to win games. So we have to be good tacklers, and so I think that is very important to implement every single day. And then from positionally, I think being in the secondary, it's just going to be, like, for safeties, is leverage drills. It could be, back pedal to get in phase. It may be leverage weave. It may be some sort of top of the route break drill. Maybe a crack replate, like something where we're putting our leverage on display. Because at the end of the day, being a quarters-based team and playing safety in a quarters-based defense, like, the leverage and your eyes are the 2 most important things that you need to be really good at. So every day we're going to do something in regards to leverage.
All right. You mentioned turnover drills. You obviously only doing 1 each circuit, but what key turnover drills do you do? What do you focus on? Is there a specific drill that you prefer over others?
Well, the other thing too, and I kind of left this out of practice schedule because if we didn't use this time, we do um, we call it like a turnover circuit, and essentially or we call it, sorry, ball disruption circuit. That's how we label it on practice. And it's for anybody. We have a specialist period where the head coach wants to watch the kickers and the snappers and the returners can catch balls and stuff. It's really before, I guess in theory, on paper, that's when practice starts. But, if you're not involved in that, now you got to go do something else. So any defensive player that's not a snapper or returner, they come over with me and any other defensive coach is not doing anything. And we lay it out where, we'll split the defense in half. So down by the 50 and then down by the end zone. And we'll try to put 3 or 4 different things in there. So one of them might be just catching the football and tucking it away. Some guys can't catch naturally. So catch the football, tuck it away. They go down and we'll have an injured guy standing there, and then they'll have to punch from behind like they're trying to knock the ball out. There's a second injured guy. They'll run up behind him and try to rake his fingers off the ball and open him up. And then they'll go to the next coach, and he may do a fumble recovery drill, right? If you get it clean and he's not near you, scoop and score. If he rolls it and he's coming in at you, well, then you got to get on in the fetal position. And, so we'll vary those kinds of things up. But just to get them moving a little bit, and turnovers are a big deal to us, and we talk about it all the time. So we try to – that's why we only usually have one in our true tackle turnover circuit, is because we've already done that ball disruption circuit. So, I think anything that you can do to establish good habits and get them of thinking about attacking the football is good. So whatever drill that you like, as long as that drill has a point of focus. And for us, when we're doing, later in the year, we'll throw them a ball, and then the other guy is trying to rip it out. So now you got a guy trying to catch the ball, and then the second guy's trying to rip it out. And early on, I want to see if they'll actually get in there and get it, or are they going to kind of brother-in-law it and kind of react from there. And then later on, it's like you get one shot here after the guy catches it to rip out. So I think that's good, because then they got to focus on a small piece of something that could be, in a grand scheme of things, people moving 100 miles an hour, come from the side, whatever, and they're trying to rip the ball out. So I personally like anything where they're having to focus in and try to, hey, grab the guy's fingers and rip it off the football, because it's very direct, it's very specific. And then the other ones, like the other tackling drills, I guess, that I like, and you can convert it to turnover as well, is like your sandwich tackle, where you're kind of 2 guys are kind of keep leverage on a ball carrier. I think that's always great, because, again, leverage, no matter what position you play, you got to understand angles and leverage. So those are just a couple of things that we do that I like. I'm sure there's plenty more, but off the top of my head, those are the ones that, we're probably going to do every week.
Kind of just moving on to defensive staff real quick. How do you develop staff camaraderie with your defensive staff? Build a relationship, build what's the word I want to use? Put everybody on the same page and gain a common focus on how you do what you do in terms of scheme, assignments, adjustments. How do you get everybody on the same page?
I think first and foremost is, just letting them know that ideas are wanted, right? And to kind of speak their mind. But at the end of the day, when we leave, we got to be unified. So it's funny, because just the other day we were having a defensive staff meeting, and, I think the biggest thing that I want as the coordinator is for us to kind of bounce a lot of ideas off each other and kind of come to a consensus. And whoever idea was great. At the end of the day, like, we're all going to be on the same page. But then when we go to the head coach, like, I want to be unified. I'm not going to say, hey, I thought of this, I did that. I'm going to say we did X, Y, and Z, so that everyone's a part of it. Because I would rather us kind of argue it out and, butt heads and stuff, but at the end of the day, leave with the same goal when we go to the head coach and talk about things. I think that's ideal. And again, I think the way that I've approached it is, when I have an issue with something, I try to say, like, look, this is what I think and I'm seeing. Like, I'm not saying you're doing a bad job or whatever. Like, I just want to tell you what I think, and then you tell me, like, hey, these guys aren't stepping very well in practice. Or, when they get off the ball, they're stepping on themselves. Are you guys doing any, first step drills? Yeah, well, we're doing this one. Like, well, let me see it. And then try to, maybe they're, I can add some value to whatever drill they're doing, or vice versa. Or, hey, they'll come up during practice, like, hey, we ran this. It didn't look so good. Okay, good. We'll put it on hold. Or, hey, let's keep an eye on it when we watch it during the team period. So, and then too, I think just, not always kind of telling people what to do. You know what I mean? Just let them be themselves. And then if something you see you don't agree with, or you got a question about, just ask. I think that's a big thing. And then anytime you can get together outside of work, I think helps. A couple of our staff is, so we have myself, we have a guy that coaches our defensive end and does our special teams, and then our head coach is actually our linebacker coach, and then we have two part-time guys that are high school teachers. They were high school coaches for a long time in the area. So I probably spend more of my time with the two part-time guys than anybody. And I think they've helped me a lot. And, I don't leave them out of things. Like, they're at school teaching during the day, right? If something comes up, boom, I'm trying to text them, or they're texting me. And that way, when we get to practice, they know what's going on and they feel like they're involved. And, Mondays, we wait until they get there to start going over the game plan so they're not lost. So I think it's a combination of everything, and I think at the end of the day, though, we can say all these great things. And I know at times I'm hard to get along with. And I think anybody that says you can get along with anybody is probably a little naive. I think there could be some issues, but we've been fortunate here that everybody gets along, and, we all want to win, and we all know the kind of the limitations and expectations at the same time. And, just got to work through them, and anything we can do to get better together is gonna help us all. So.
Great, Coach. Kind of last question before I let you go here. Do you have any advice either for high school or smaller college coaches, especially defensive coaches, on how they can develop better relationships with their kids, and maybe implement their defenses a little bit better? Just general advice.
I think the relationship with the players, I think there's a ton of things you can do there. And I mean, it could be as simple as, like, one thing that, we try to do is, if there's during the season, it's easier during the season. Right now it's kind of hard. If somebody has a birthday, I'll get my wife to make them some cookies or brownies or something, and we'll have an in-position meeting. Or if she doesn't have time, I'll stop at Kroger on the way in and buy a cake. Like, just something to make them feel like, hey, we're thinking about you, whatever. And I know it sounds kind of cheesy and corny or whatever, but they're at college. Who knows how far away from home? And if their parents can't come up, you're kind of the next one in line to kind of look after them or whatever, and give them a treat, make them feel at least make them feel good for a couple minutes. You know what I mean? I think that's one thing. And then, during the season, I always try to have the guys come over to the house and eat. Like last year, we did it during the bye week because we weren't the schedule wasn't as packed. And I think those things help when you get your players in your environment where you live, around your family, around your kids. I think all that stuff's great. And then, the final thing I'd say there is just, being honest with them, in all facets of everything, and just getting them to understand that, especially for me, like, I want you to be a good player. I want you to win, and that's how I'm gonna approach each day. So just understand where it's coming from. And I think once you establish a relationship, then it's easier to get on them and congratulate them and all those other things. So, like I said, I think there's a lot of little things you can do there. Group text messages, or message them by themselves. The technology is so easy that you can do some of those things. And as far as getting your defense installed to a younger coach, or I'm not that old either, but I think you got to go to bed with something. So whatever it is you're going to do, just, buy totally into that thing. Like, put all your chips in that basket and work through the issues. And then at the end of the season, if you want to change. But I think you got to feel confident in something. And I think it's a lot easier to know what the issues are during a game and during a practice if you understand your scheme because you're all in, right? Like hey, we did this. Okay, well, it was either this guy or this guy. You know what I mean? Without even seeing anything, turn my back to play. You tell me where the ball went. I could tell you who messed up. And I think just believing in what you're doing and just selling out to that will help you be a better coach because you'll understand how things should happen and why they happen and even maybe there's some deficiencies because every defense has some holes or deficiencies or whatever, and understanding what those are and kind of playing off of those. But you get some people want to change so quickly that they've got a bunch of ideas and a bunch of things they want to do, but they're really not good at anything because they don't. Like, what are you hanging your hat on? You got to go to bed with something. And I know every night when I lay my head down, like, yeah, every game there's probably a call or two that I probably could have done better, right? Some games maybe more, but at least I know that we practiced that. Like, we showed them that, we prepared for that, and I knew what I was getting myself into. So, that may sound like kind of cheesy advice, but it's not like changing clothes, right? I mean, you're going to wear, you want to play a certain defense, we'll play it and figure out what your guys can and can't do and try to get good at it. We can't, you tell these kids all the time, don't give up on themselves, don't give up so quick. Well, I think we as coaches, like, you can't do that either. You got to get good at something and take notes, go see people. Hey, I want to change defense to this defense. Well, go find every coach that anybody that you know or don't know or whatever that runs anything remotely close to that. Go try to talk to them, email them, do anything, watch an online video. Like, I think there's so much access out there right now that you can really dive into something if you're serious about it and just go to bed with it.